The purpose of the Minnesota Migrant Education Program under ESSA is to meet the unique educational needs of migratory children and their families to ensure that migratory children reach the same challenging academic standards as all students and achieve graduation. Key components of the MEP are identification, recruitment, and eligibility. To understand how a child qualifies for the Migrant Education Program, you will need to learn the MEP eligibility factors that are the key definitions for determining eligibility. The information based on the factors used to determine MEP eligibility for migratory children are documented in Section 3 of the COE. The MEP Eligibility Factors Checklist is a useful tool that can be used to help determine MEP eligibility. Keep in mind that if you use the checklist, your interview should be in a comfortable, casual conversation where you are asking non-leading questions to determine if the children and the worker meet the factors on this sheet. For a sample of interview questions, see the sample interview script that is shared from the Migrant Education Program National IDNR Manual. Here are some things to consider when using the MEP Eligibility Factors checklist. Moves and qualifying activities from other states are considered in determining eligibility. The child does not have to move with the worker for recent history of moves. However, they must be in our state to be included on the COE. The worker's status date and the child's qualifying arrival date are not always the same. Babies born after the move are not eligible for the MEP. These BAM babies and other children who have graduated may be listed in the comments section of the COE. You will notice that the Migrant Education Program definitions are part of the factors we will be going over. These factors will be used to determine if a child meets the definition of a migratory child and that the worker meets the definition of a migratory agricultural worker or migratory fisher, as well as the other factors meeting the definitions for eligibility purposes. Factor 1. Child's age. The child is younger than 22 years old on the date of the interview. Factor 2. Child's school completion status. The child is entitled to a free public education through grade 12 under state law. For example, the child is not a high school graduate or does not hold a high school equivalency diploma, or the child is not yet at a grade level at which the school district provides a free public education. The Minnesota Department of Education recognizes diplomas or secondary school degrees and certificates of completion in lieu of a diploma issued by another country. Factor 3A. Child's qualifying move. The child moved within the 36 months preceding the date of the interview. The move made by the child was due to economic necessity and from one residence to another residence and from one school district to another school district. In this factor, you are only trying to determine if the child, not the worker, made a qualifying move. You will determine if the worker made a qualifying move in Factor 4A. Factor 3B. Child's qualifying move relative to the migratory agricultural worker or migratory fisher. The child's qualifying move in Factor 3A was with, to join, or to precede a parent, guardian, or spouse who is a migratory agricultural worker or a migratory fisher, whose status has been determined in Factors 4A and 4B. For Factor 3B, you are trying to determine if the child, not the worker, made the qualifying move with, to join, or precede someone who is a migratory agricultural worker or migratory fisher. Keep in mind there may be cases where the child is also the worker. In these cases, you are still trying to determine if the child made the qualifying move. Factors 1, 2, 3A, and 3B combined meet the definition of a migratory child. You may need to come back to Factor 3B if at this point you have not yet determined if the worker meets the definition of a migratory agricultural worker or migratory fisher. Factor 4A. migratory agriculture workers or migratory fishers qualifying move, the parent, guardian, spouse, or child, if the child is the worker, moved within the 36 months preceding the date of the interview, and the move made by the parent, guardian, spouse, or child, if the child is the worker, was due to economic necessity, and from one residence to another residence, and from one school district to another school district. Factor 4B. Qualifying work for the migratory agricultural worker or migratory fisher. After the qualifying move in Factor 4A, the parent, guardian, spouse, or child, if the child is the worker, engaged in new qualifying work soon after the move, or did not engage in new qualifying work soon after the move, but he or she actively sought new qualifying work and has a recent history of moves for qualifying work. The qualifying work is seasonal employment or temporary employment or personal subsistence, and the qualifying work is agricultural or fishing. For this factor, there are two options to determine if the worker is a migratory agricultural worker or migratory fisher. The first option, engaged, applies if they are doing initial processing work that is seasonal or temporary in agriculture or fishing, or that they attended orientation for qualifying work within 60 days of the qualifying move. Orientation is when the worker is considered hired and are being trained for their job. Orientation is not being interviewed, given information on job duties, and taking a tour of the employment site. If they engaged in qualifying work more than 60 days after the move, it needs prior approval from the Migrant Education Services Manager. For temporary employment to be considered qualifying work, the worker must be engaged no more than 12 months. Personal subsistence is not typical in our state. If you are determining eligibility using personal subsistence, you must provide a comment with details clearly explaining this determination. If the worker did not engage in new qualifying work soon after the qualifying move, we need to know what they did to look for or actively seek new qualifying work soon after the move. They need to have at least 2 moves for past history where they engaged in qualifying work. History is in the last 3 years from your interview date. These past moves do not need to meet the definition of qualifying moves, unless they only have 1 move and you are using it to document when the worker established as a migratory agricultural worker or migratory fisher. In such cases, you would document the past date in which they made the qualifying move and engaged in new qualifying work soon after that move. To meet the definition of migratory agricultural worker or migratory fisher, the worker needs to meet factors 4A in either the first or second part of 4B. The children are eligible for the Title I Migrant Education Program when they meet all of the factors. The qualifying arrival date, which is the date in which they arrive to the current school district, is good for 36 months. A migratory child who has dropped out of school is considered an out-of-school youth, or OSY. If you find a family with an out-of-school youth who is also a migratory agricultural worker, you would need to fill out a separate certificate of eligibility for that youth worker, as they have a different eligibility criteria than the rest of the children in the family. However, if a migratory child who is also a migratory agricultural worker has not dropped out of school and plan to attend school while they work or when they are done working, they should be on the same COE as the rest of the migratory children in the family. Conduct an eligibility interview when the family makes a move to our state from another state, or a move within our state and the family indicates that the move was for agricultural or fishing work. All eligibility factors must be met with each new move to fill out a new COE. Children who make a new qualifying move within 36 months before their current qualifying arrival date expires with, to join or precede, a migratory agricultural worker or migratory fisher, or on their own as a migratory agricultural worker or migratory fisher, would have a new qualifying arrival date for another 36 months if all of the factors are met with this new move. If the children do not make a new qualifying move and their qualifying arrival date expires, they are no longer considered migratory children and are not eligible for MEP services. However, they may be served under continuation of services during the performance period in which their eligibility expired. MEP eligibility ends when the children graduate, obtain a GED, or when they turn 22 years old. When a worker establishes him or herself as a migratory agricultural worker or migratory fisher, that status remains for 36 months, even if there are no more qualifying moves. It's important to note that children may be eligible even if a migratory agricultural worker makes a qualifying move and does not engage in new qualifying work. As long as the children have made the move with, to join or precede the migratory agricultural worker, they may be eligible. If the worker does not make a new qualifying move for new qualifying work and their status expires, they are no longer considered a migratory agricultural worker and their children might not be eligible for the MEP. However, as previously stated, an interview should be conducted for all moves that the family makes to determine if they are eligible for the MEP. Age is not a factor for the migratory agricultural worker or migratory fisher status. There are times when families make non-qualifying moves and may not meet all of the eligibility factors. This is why it's important to conduct the eligibility interview. If the children do not meet all of the factors, they may not be eligible for the migrant education program. However, you should check the national database M6 in case the children were identified and recruited in our state. If they are within their 36 months of eligibility, their qualifying arrival date is not affected by subsequent non-qualifying moves and may still be eligible for services. The eligibility flowchart is another tool you can use. It provides a visual of the eligibility factors checklist. Use whichever is most useful to you. If initial interview questions do not draw out the information needed to determine eligibility, make sure you are asking additional, non-leading questions. Review the sample interview script form to familiarize yourself with additional questions prior to conducting an interview. Take as many notes as necessary during the interview, as you may need to share that information. If you are still not sure if a child is eligible, let the family know that you need to check with your supervisor or the state education agency, and you will notify them of the determination. We will need to review all of the factors closely. Having all of the information from the interview will help determine if the children qualify for the migrant education program. If more information is needed, you may need to contact the family for further information before we can determine eligibility. If this is your first time interviewing to determine MEP eligibility, you will need to shadow a regional recruiter. To set up a date and time, fill out a recruitment request when you have a family who may be eligible for the MEP. A regional recruiter will get in touch with you to determine when you and the family have time to meet or do a phone interview. You will need to shadow the regional recruiter 2 or 3 times. Then, the regional recruiter will listen in on 2 or 3 interviews that you conduct to support and guide you as needed. These interviews should be documented and turned into the Migrant Education Services Manager by the Certified Migrant Liaison or Trained and Certified Recruiter. The goal here is to provide in-person training in conducting an eligibility interview. During these shadow sessions, the families should be notified that they will be interviewed with 2 people present, especially if it's over the phone. Please contact me if you have any questions about the MEP Eligibility Factors checklist or on determining eligibility for the Migrant Education Program.